What is up, ladies and gentlemen? But most of all, you ladies out there, thanks for clicking on another episode of Break the Silence. I am your host, Cyborg. Spider to the Cavs. We talk next. Split cow! I have been dying to talk some hoops, and we got the massive Woj bomb we were looking for today. Donovan Mitchell traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers in an absolute haul. We're going to talk about this from both perspectives because I have a very interesting connection to both organizations. My dad and brother, my oldest brother, are diehard Utah Jazz fans. So my entire life I grew up next to Utah Jazz fans. I've been rooting for the Jazz. I got my Jazz jersey here. So I've watched a ton of Donovan Mitchell, and I kind of know how Jazz fans feel on this one. My roommate and my younger brother are both Cleveland Cavalier fans. So a lot of Cleveland Cavaliers, watch a lot of Cleveland games too because I'm actually closest to Cleveland. So this is a very, very crazy trade. It wasn't even being reported that Donovan Mitchell was in the talks for Cleveland. As far as I hadn't heard anything. I don't know if anyone else had heard anything. I had heard Miami, potentially. New York was the big one that they kept talking about. So we're going to get into this because I want to look at this from both sides, and I want to talk about kind of everything going on here. First, please take a second to like and subscribe to the channel. We are getting so close to 400 subs. So please take a second to like and subscribe as we continue on our journey. So in this trade, the Cavs gave up 3 unprotected first-round picks, 2 pick swaps. Colin Sexton was in a sign-and trade, so he went to Utah in a sign-and trade. Lauri Markkanen, and then the rookie the Cavs just drafted this year. I apologize if I messed up his name. It's Ochair. Don't want to mess up his name there, but headed to the Utah Jazz in exchange for Donovan Mitchell. Now, let's look at this from Utah to start here. We kind of knew that Donovan Mitchell was out when the Pat Bev trade happened. Why do you make that trade if you're Utah? Well, if you're trading a Pat Bev, who's kind of a win-now veteran, a guy that you add on your roster when you're trying to win a championship. It's not a dude building for the future. You traded him for THT, who was a young, his career kind of went off track, was very bad in LA last year. But you traded for kind of a young prospect there. This showed everyone that the Utah Jazz were in full rebuild mode after the Rudy Gobert trade. And they got a haul for that Rudy Gobert trade, which I still can't believe. I'm actually going to look at that later. I think they might have got a little more for Rudy Gobert, which I think shocks me a little bit. But so the Utah Jazz here, this tells me I am in full tank for Victor Wembayama mode. And I think that we're going to see this. I have been harking on this guy in a ton of my videos here, and I'm going to keep talking about him because he's one of those prospects that changes the whole outlook of the NBA. And that's why we're hearing rumors like, does Russell Westbrook potentially get traded to the Pacers? No. Do the Pacers want Russell Westbrook? No. But they could potentially tank to the point and completely throw the season, getting rid of Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, completely tank the season in order to compete for that Victor Wembayama sweepstakes. The Spurs just got rid of DeJounte Murray a couple months ago. You have teams that are now getting rid of some of their young studs in an opportunity to chase this young prospect. And so it'll be really interesting to see how that pans out because you're going to see a lot of tanking. Do the Pacers end up making that trade to compete for that? Because when you're a small market team, a team like the Pacers, a team like the Jazz, even to a certain extent the Spurs, when you're a smaller market team, you can't necessarily get the big name free agents. A guy like a Victor Wembayama, you wouldn't get in free agency as easily. But if you draft him, much like a Giannis Antetokounmpo, you build him up, you build around him, he potentially stays, especially some of these foreign players that aren't necessarily fixated on going to LA or fixated on going to Chicago. A guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo is very happy in Milwaukee. You wonder if Victor Wembayama could be very happy to a place like Utah or Indiana or a place like that. So that's what the Jazz are doing here. That's what they're doing with this move. And I'll be interested to hear what any of you Jazz fans think as far as that goes. Because when you're talking about rebuilding, I'm all for it because I think the worst place an organization could be, and I've harked on this a bunch of times, but the worst place an organization could be is right in the middle of the pack. You don't want to be a team that, are we going to make the playoffs this year, or are we going to barely miss? You're not going to get a good enough draft pick to truly rebuild. You're not really attracting free agents because you're not that good, and you're not really selling big ticket playoff prices. So that's where I think the Jazz were with just Spida without Rudy Gobert. And I think that this is truly saying, okay, we're going to be bottom dwellers this year. And now the Jazz have, between the two trades, 6 unprotected first-round picks, 3 pick swaps they got from the Gobert and Mitchell trade. And that's not even counting all the young players that they got, because they got the first-round pick of both the Cavs and the Timberwolves this year. So overall, you almost got 8 first-round picks. So that is a haul that the Utah Jazz got. Plus, you're adding Colin Sexton on a 4-year. They signed and traded him. So it was a 4-year, $72 million deal. Good for Colin Sexton, because I wasn't sure. I kept asking myself, has Colin Sexton been signed yet? I want to talk about this from the Cavs perspective, because we talked about the other day how great the Eastern Conference is. We talked about this in the Kevin Durant video. The Eastern Conference has got some dogs in it, and it's going to be an absolute battle. And we just got one of those teams that was a fringe playoff team, just added Donovan Mitchell, an all-star guard who we've seen have massive playoff games. Now, when you're looking at the Cavs' new lineup, you have Darius Garland, who was an all-star last year and really, really shined. Darius Garland was someone that I hadn't... was one of those interesting players that you're like, it kind of looks like he has game, but the shots aren't falling and the production's not really there. It was like he do a sweet dribble move, shot looks good, and then it just doesn't really fall. This year, he finally started to put it together, and we saw great potential from Darius Garland, and it's partly because he got some good big men around him, which we'll get to in a second. But you're adding Darius Garland, you got Spida at the 2, you got Evan Mobley, who, when I release my player rankings, I am very high on Evan Mobley. If you watch his game, I love the way he plays basketball. To me, he's almost got some similarities to a Kevin Garnett, who is my favorite player of all time. Not the intensity part, obviously, but he's very long, very good rim protector. Seems very intelligent, and kind of got that mid-range game. And so I'm very excited to watch Evan Mobley's progression, because I think he could be a monster this year, to the point where I think he could potentially be an all-star. Keep your eye out for that. But then you also have Jarrett Allen, who was also an all-star last year. So you have 4 guys in that starting lineup now that are all-stars. Potential Evan Mobley's not yet, but potential all-stars. You're going to have to figure out what to do with that 3 position, because when you're looking at that lineup, perimeter defense is very limited, because as we know, Donovan Mitchell, great offensive player, fairly poor defender. Darius Garland's a little undersized, so he's not going to be the best defender in the world, but your post presence defensively is insane. With Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, you're talking about potentially the best rim protection in the entire NBA. You're looking at the Timberwolves also have great, the Celtics have great. There are other teams with great rim protection, but the Cavs are going to be right there in that conversation as some of the best paint defense in the NBA. So the question is, who do you start at the 3 position? My guess would be is they start Isaac Okoro, guy they drafted a couple years ago. Now, he's not my favorite player in the world. He's got to develop. If he can develop a little corner 3, he's done his job. But he's athletic, and he's a very good perimeter defender. So if the Cavs go out with, Garland, Spida, Okoro, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen, you're talking about a starting lineup that Okoro can kind of play perimeter defense, and then you have your 2 big men down low that are absolute stoppers in the paint. So it would make for a very interesting year. And then you look at some of the Cavs' depth. They have decent depth. I think where they're really lacking is in that forward wing position. You have Okoro. Kevin Love is, he's more of a power forward. Now, they're deep in the guard. You got Rajon Rondo, Ricky Rubio, Karis LeVert, And then big men, obviously, Love, Mobley, and Jared Allen. Then you have CD Osman, Chetty Osman. I don't freaking know what his name is. They say it different every time. CD Osman, though, playing there as your other wing position. So when you're looking at the Cleveland Cavaliers, you're now talking about a contender. You're talking about a team that if Evan Mobley makes that jump that I think he has the potential to make, becoming one of those top 20, 25 players in the NBA. Spida is a top 20 player in the NBA. Jared Allen, Darius Garland, both top 50 players in the NBA, in my opinion. And then you got a solid bench, solid depth, and I like their coach. So the Cleveland Cavaliers this year are real contenders to not necessarily win the NBA championship. I don't think they're at that level yet. But you're talking about a real foundation of young guys to build around that'll be very exciting to watch. And they're going to start to be in those conversations, maybe not in the Celtics Bucks, but right below. You know, you got your Miami Heat, you got your Philadelphia 76ers. Cleveland's going to be right in that discussion. Can they compete? Probably not for a title this year, but could they win a playoff round? That would be an excellent step forward for the Cavs. If they could win one round and then you start to see these young studs becoming the players that I think they ultimately will become. I love this trade for Cleveland. I like it for the Jazz. They talked about potentially could they have gotten RJ Barrett in 2 firsts. I think if you have RJ Barrett, I think you're too good to get the number 1 seed. So I think that's why the Jazz ultimately decided to go in this direction, go a little more pick heavy maybe than the RJ Barrett would have been. But ultimately, we're very excited for this upcoming season. You do realize that we're now in September. Preseason basketball starts in September. So we're very close to basketball. I couldn't be more excited. We're going to talk. We got way more to talk about. We're going to keep discussing it. Appreciate y'all watching. Please take a second to like and subscribe. Cyborg out.